Hello and welcome to this edition of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. At least 19 people were killed and more than 100 others were wounded across cities in Ukraine in a massive Russian drone and missile barrage that started on Wednesday daytime and stretched until the dawn of Thursday. Kiev too has stepped up its own long-range drone and missile attacks on Russia, with 2 people, including a 14-year-old girl, being killed in a Ukrainian drone attack in southern Russia. The renewal in hostilities has come after a brief ceasefire took place over Orthodox Easter last weekend. Our next report tells you more.
The Russia-Ukraine war, which is Europe's biggest conflict since World War II and well into its 5th year, isn't exhibiting any signs of coming to an end anytime soon. On Thursday morning, Ukraine's Air Force said that Russia had launched 659 drones and 44 cruise and ballistic missiles in the prior 24 hours, making it the deadliest Russian assault in months. Furthermore, Ukraine's Air Force claimed that 636 drones and 31 missiles had been shot down, while admitting that there had been direct hits in 26 locations. In wave after wave of Russian drones and missiles, 9 people had been killed in the southern port city of Odessa, 5 in the central city of Dnipro, and 4, including a child, in the capital Kyiv.
We wanted to run to the basement, the ground floor, but we didn't make it because the windows started falling on us there. My neighbor has a 1-year-old child. He had blood on his neck, which was slightly cut by the glass. Honestly, it's horrific. All night today we were bombed. They didn't stop even for half an hour. At 2:40 they gave the all clear. We went inside and around 4 something it started again.
The first strike was at around the beginning of 3 a.m. It was already very loud. We were startled awake. I immediately told everyone to check the windows to see if they were intact. The windows were intact. About 3 minutes later, there was a second strike. I heard the sound of glass breaking.
In addition to the people killed, more than 100 people were wounded in the attacks that ripped through apartment buildings in the middle of the night. In the aftermath of the massive Russian assault, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who is on a tour of Europe, called for a minute of silence for those killed at an event in a church in the Netherlands. Moscow, however, claimed that it had carried out a massive strike against Ukrainian military and energy targets. It is to be noted that Russia has repeatedly denied targeting civilians throughout its invasion, despite thousands killed in strikes on apartments, hospitals, train stations, and other civilian infrastructure across Ukraine. A defiant Kyiv has stepped up its own long-range drone and missile attacks on Russia. According to the local governor, a 14-year-old girl and a young woman were killed and 5 others were wounded in the Black Sea city of Tuapse when a volley of drones launched by Ukraine hit housing and a music school. Moscow claimed that its forces intercepted 207 Ukrainian drones across its western and southern regions. On Thursday, President Volodymyr Zelensky, addressing journalists in the Dutch city of Middelburg, had warned that Ukraine was facing a critical shortage of anti-ballistic missiles.
We also discussed about anti-ballistic systems, what we have, and we have, today our system work each day and work very well. More than 90% we can destroy everything except big deficit with anti-ballistic missiles.
Kyiv is also anxious for a €90 billion European Union loan to be released as soon as possible, now that the chief opponent of that, Viktor Orban, has been voted out of power in Hungary. But the major concern is that the peace process, with the US acting as mediator, has been stalled, ever since US President Donald Trump shifted his focus to the Iran war.
Despite 7 months of ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, over 750 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed in repeated Israeli bombings on the besieged occupied Palestinian territory. Currently, the global attention is fixated on the Iran war and the Strait of Hormuz. And away from the media glare, Israel has systematically escalated its attacks on the Gaza Strip and has choked off humanitarian aid, plunging the besieged enclave into what economic experts are now calling is an engineered compounded famine. The number of aid trucks entering into Gaza has dropped drastically, in violation of the October 2025 ceasefire. The intensity of the Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has spiked during the Iran war, between the 28th of February till the 8th of April. While Israel and the United States were engaged in a bombing campaign on Iran, the Israeli forces bombed Gaza a total of 36 of the 40 days. So what is happening in the Gaza Strip at a time where the world's attention is on the United States and the Israeli war on Iran, and at a time when Gaza should have had a ceasefire? Our next report tells you more.
As far as the eye can see, there is death and destruction in the Gaza Strip. Nominally on paper, there is a ceasefire, but the relentless Israel bombings have continued. In the courtyard of the Al-Shifa hospital, the family members of the Palestinians who were killed in an Israeli bombing had gathered. Just hours earlier, the family was preparing for a wedding.
They went to get clothes and the bride's dress for their Abdel Sattar al-Attar's daughter, because his daughter's wedding was next week. They left the house with clothes, only to find them torn to pieces and blood.
An Israeli drone had targeted them in Beit Lahia when the family was out shopping ahead of the wedding.
Their wedding turned to death, to killing. The bride's clothes became a pile of blood and flesh of the father and the uncle. For how long will the Arabs remain silent? Wake up, Arabs. The wedding has turned to condolences, to blood, to martyrs. 2 martyrs in the prime of their lives. They left for no reason, for nothing. What is happening to us is a disgrace.
In another part of the Gaza Strip, another funeral was underway for the Palestinians who were killed in yet another Israeli bombing. In Gaza City, a Gazan police car was struck, killing 3 Palestinians, including a 3-year-old child, while 9 other people sustained injuries. Even with respect to the humanitarian aid that is being allowed into the Gaza Strip, there are clear gaps between what was promised as part of the ceasefire and what is actually allowed. In Israel frequently claims it is allowing hundreds of aid trucks into Gaza. But Palestinian officials and economic experts argue these figures are a deliberate mathematical deception. Just 37% of the trucks stipulated under the ceasefire agreement have been let in. The fuel situation is even more critical, with only 366 fuel trucks entering out of a promised 9,200, an abysmal 14% compliance rate. So, is there a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip? Well, on paper, yes, but Palestinians are still getting killed in repeated Israeli attacks, and is humanitarian aid being delivered to Gaza? Yes, a fraction of what is needed, and Palestinians are still going hungry.
The Sudan civil war, with no peace deal in sight, has now entered into its 4th year. With deepening political fractures, the conflict has led to one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. Tens of thousands of people have been killed and millions have been uprooted from their homes, both inside Sudan and across the region. The gravity of the situation can be gauged by the fact that 1 out of every 4 Sudanese people has been displaced. On Wednesday, the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres, calling for an end to what he termed as a nightmare, said that the 3rd anniversary of Sudan's war marks a tragic milestone. Our next report tells you more.
Since April 2023, the Republic of Sudan, Africa's 3rd largest country by size, has been torn apart by a power struggle between the Sudanese army chief and the country's de facto leader, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and the powerful paramilitary Rapid Support Forces, Commander Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo. Why did an all-out war erupt between the army chief al-Burhan and General Dagalo, who were once allies? The army and the paramilitary had shared power with civilians after the 2019 ouster of former strongman Omar al-Bashir. And in 2021, the army and the rapid support forces joined hands together to stage a coup. But relations soured between the army and the rapid support forces over the planned integration of the paramilitary into the regular army, an internationally backed political transition plan leading to an all-out war in mid-April 2023. Since the eruption of the Sudan civil war, tens of thousands of people have been killed and approximately 14 million people have been forced to flee from their homes. 9 million of these have been displaced inside Sudan and 4.4 million across borders, precipitating what the UN agencies describe as the largest humanitarian emergency in the world.
The current humanitarian situation in Sudan is nothing short of a disaster, and the number of displaced continues to grow, the number of malnourished children continues to grow, the outbreaks of cholera, measles, and other diseases continues on a regular basis. The war continues to move.
The war-ravaged nation has effectively been divided in two, with the Sudanese army holding sway at the center, east and north, whereas the paramilitary rapid support forces and its allies control most of the west and south-central regions, covering about 40% of the country's territory. Despite repeated international efforts to broker a ceasefire, both sides have exhibited little willingness to budge from their position. Last July, the RSF had declared a parallel government, a move condemned as illegal by Sudan's central authorities, but effectively making Sudan have two rival governments coexisting.
Now, after 3 years, now we are seeing that the conflict is continuous in the 6 states of the country. But the big issue now, we see that the political fragmentation in Sudan and also the social fragmentation, the big social fragmentation, that the direct impact of the war.
Caught in the crossfire, civilians are bearing the brunt of the war, in which infrastructure has been severely damaged, agricultural and industrial production has been disrupted, and public services have been severely hampered.
Everyone is in a very difficult situation. Life is hard, and we are already exhausted. Drone attacks happen all the time, so we have to sleep on the streets often. There are no beds, no toilets. The situation is really terrible.
Sudan's already fragile economy has been crippled due to the civil war. Transport, communication, electricity, water supply, education and healthcare. Infrastructure has been severely damaged, disrupting water, electricity and gas supplies. Public services, such as garbage collection and environmental sanitation, are nearly paralyzed.
The sanitation here is very poor and there are many mosquitoes. We desperately need insecticides and clean drinking water. The power supply is also very unstable. Even more serious is the water problem. We have to pay high prices for drinking water. The current situation is really very difficult.
On Wednesday, at an international aid conference in Berlin, more than 1.3 billion euros was pledged for Sudan. At the same conference, the German Foreign Ministry released a statement by the UN Secretary-General calling for an end to the nightmare.
An entire generation of children has been robbed of education, and the consequences are not confined to Sudan. They are destabilizing the wider region. Excellencies, this nightmare must end. That requires unity and urgency. Civilians must be protected. Humanitarian workers must be able to carry out their life-saving work safely and without obstruction. Humanitarian operations must be fully funded. Yet last year, less than 40% of the humanitarian support required was delivered.
What's worse is that despite the scale of suffering in Sudan, the severe humanitarian crisis is still not getting the attention it deserves from the international community, largely due to other global hotspots, which gives rise to the question, is the Sudan humanitarian crisis the most neglected crisis on the planet?
The Republic of Turkey plunged into shock and disbelief due to 2 deadly mass school shootings on consecutive days. First, on the 14th of April in southeast Turkey, a former student in his late teens fired indiscriminately with a shotgun, injuring 16 at his former high school before killing himself. But the worst was yet to come. The very next day, 8 students and a teacher were killed in southern Turkey when a 14-year-old student opened fire at another high school in a crime that has left the nation bewildered and grieving. Our next report tells you more.
A nation largely unfamiliar to the scourge of mass shootings was jolted out of its slumber on Tuesday. At least 16 people, including students and teachers, were wounded at a high school in Turkey's southeastern province of Sandiurfa when the assailant, an ex-student in his late teens, fired indiscriminately with a shotgun before killing himself with the weapon.
This morning, at approximately 9:30, a person born in 2007 entered the Ahmet Koyuncu Vocational and Technical Anatolian High School in Siverek district with a pump-action shotgun and opened fire randomly. As a result, unfortunately, 16 people were injured, including 4 teachers, 10 students, 1 police officer, and 1 canteen worker. Thankfully, there were no fatalities.
Reportedly, the attacker, who had no prior criminal record, was cornered by the swift responding police, whereupon he committed suicide, fearing arrest. The very next day, 8 students aged 10 and 11 years old and 1 teacher were killed when a 14-year-old opened fire at Eser Çalik Secondary School in the city of Kahramanmaraş in southern Turkey. The attacker, who had reportedly planned the dastardly act in advance, was also killed during the incident, in which 13 others were wounded, including 3 believed to be in a critical condition.
We have 9 deaths. 8 of them are students and 1 is a teacher. Besides that, we have 13 injured. 6 of them are in intensive care, 3 of whom are in critical condition.
Reportedly, the attacker, an 8th grade student at the school, entered 2 classrooms and had 5 guns and 7 magazines with him. According to the police, the attacker had referenced US mass killer Elliot Rodger in a photo on his WhatsApp profile. Elliot Rodger had murdered 6 people before taking his own life in California in 2014.
The attacker came to school with guns in his bag that we believe belonged to his father. He fired randomly without targeting anyone in particular, entered 2 classrooms where there were 5th grade students, causing injuries and deaths. So far, unfortunately, we have identified 4 fatalities. 1 of them is a teacher, and 3 are our students. The attacker died too. He shot himself in that moment of chaos and was killed. Whether he did it to commit suicide or it just happened in the confusion, but he died as well. The attacker was an 8th grade student, a student at our school. His father is a former police officer. We suspect he took his father's guns.
On Thursday, hundreds gathered near the city's main mosque for the funerals of the young victims, as family members and mourners flocked around coffins draped in the Turkish flag in the city of Kahramanmaraş. Mourners also placed roses on the steps of the school that was attacked. In the capital, Ankara, some 3,500 teachers gathered to call for the education minister to quit. In the build-up to the funerals, police arrested 162 people accused of posting controversial content online about the 2 deadly school shootings. While a nation unfamiliar with such tragedies attempts to cope with the grief, calls for more protection in schools have also gained momentum.
North Korea test-fired 2 strategic cruise missiles and 3 anti-ship missiles from its new 5,000-ton destroyer Chohyon. The missiles were launched over the waters of the country's west coast, flying along some preset trajectories for extended durations, with the cruise missiles flying for more than 2 hours, while the anti-ship missiles flew for about half an hour before striking targets with what North Korea described as ultra-precision accuracy. These missile launches mark the first publicly disclosed anti-ship missile firing from the North Korean destroyer Cho-hyun, and they've come amidst broader efforts to expand North Korea's naval power, including plans for at least 2 additional destroyers and indications of a growing North Korean naval fleet rather than isolated platforms. Our next report tells you more.
North Korea is flexing its missile capabilities, and this week, North Korea test-fired 2 strategic cruise missiles and 3 anti-ship missiles that were launched from its naval destroyer warship. North Korea uses the term strategic for its missile systems to indicate nuclear warhead capability. This is the first publicly disclosed firing of anti-ship missiles from Chu-Hyon. While it is the 3rd known test launch of North Korea's strategic cruise missiles, Cho-Hyon was launched on the 25th of April 2025 and is North Korea's largest warship. The 5,000-ton destroyer is said to have nuclear weapons capabilities with its cruise missiles and tactical ballistic missiles carrying nuclear warheads. Kim Jong-un, who oversaw the test launches, has stated that continuously and limitlessly expanding and strengthening a powerful and reliable nuclear war deterrence is his most critical priority. Kim Jong-un had previously called for a build rate of 2 Chu-Hyon-class destroyers or larger warships annually. Simultaneously, North Korea is reportedly making very serious progress in its ability to produce more nuclear weapons, the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog has said. In another sign that North Korea is seeking to use its nuclear arsenal to ensure its survival, North Korea is thought to have assembled about 50 nuclear warheads, although some experts are skeptical of its claims that it is able to miniaturize the warheads so that they can be attached to long-range ballistic missiles.
We have been able to confirm that there is a rapid increase in the operation of the WION 5 megawatt reactor, also the operation of the reprocessing unit, the operation of the light water reactor, and the activation of other facilities apart from WION. All of them point to a very serious increase in the capabilities of the DPRK in the area of nuclear weapons production, which is estimated at a few dozen warheads.
On the 9th of April, North Korea tested a new cluster bomb warhead on a ballistic missile and an electromagnetic weapon, in a move that was seen as part of efforts by Pyongyang to showcase its capacity to fight a modern war. The country's Academy of Defense Science and the Missile Administration also conducted tests of carbon fiber bombs and a mobile short-range anti-aircraft missile system.
North Korea is now focusing not only on the advancing its asymmetric weapons, but also on conventional forces that lagged behind in the past. Given this trend, while the South Korean military and the US forces, Korea previously assessed North Korea's conventional tanks and armored vehicles as being significantly inferior, I am not sure if that will remain the case for the next few decades. I believe that the gap will narrow considerably within the next few years.
The tests follow North Korea reiterating its characterization of South Korea as a hostile enemy, dashing recent hopes in Seoul of easing tensions on the Korean peninsula.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of World at War. If you want to reach out to me with any comments, feedback or suggestions, please feel free to do so on the ID that you're seeing on your screens. I'm your host, Mohammed Saleh, and I'll see you again next week.